Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, 5 Tips for Taking Your Internal Events Virtual, presented by Meetings Today with Brian Ludwig from Cvent. My name is Tyler Davidson. I'm the Vice President and Chief Content Director for Meetings Today, and I'm excited to welcome you to this webinar. Our webinars cover a variety of topics that are all very important to the meetings industry, so we hope you'll join us for them all. We also offer a number of newsletters in addition to our monthly magazine. And be sure to check us out on the web at meetingstoday.com. Today's webinar is worth 1 clock hour of credit in the meeting and event design domain toward the CMP application through the Events Industry Council. To receive credit for attending this webinar, you must be present for the full hour. And upon completion, you'll be taken to a brief survey from Cvent and then to the related Meetings Today webinar club page to obtain your credit. Excuse me. And we encourage you to ask questions during the presentation. You may submit your questions at any time by typing your question in the Q&A area at the bottom of the screen. And should you experience any technical difficulties, please send a message in or call 800-553-8878. Before we get started with today's content, I wanted to make sure everyone is aware of another great upcoming webinar this month. So join us on October 28th for an inspiring CSR programs, discover corporate social responsibility programs that will engage your attendees, presented by Stuart Mann. And we'll also cover a number of digital related CSR options. So you should definitely join us for that. And then also on our website, you'll find a vault of information from past webinars, including this one, available for you to view at any time. So visit meetingstoday.com/webinars to learn more about these events, or look under the webinars navigation tab on our website and then just click on demand webinars in the drop-down menu and watch now. Now I would like to introduce today's speaker, Brian Ludwig. Brian joined Cvent in 2000, shortly after the company was founded. And he was initially a top contributing sales rep and rose through the ranks over the years. As Senior Vice President of Sales, he oversees worldwide sales of Cvent's flagship event management and marketing platform. And to this end, he travels across the globe and is often called upon to speak at conferences regarding technology trends impacting the meetings and events industry. Brian works hand in hand with Cvent's global sales team and with leadership across the organization to help shape strategy and direction in terms of product roadmap, client services, marketing initiatives, operational efficiencies, and acquisitions. And with that, I'm going to hand things off to the speaker. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you so much, Tyler. Appreciate it. Hello, everyone. We are going to cover 5 tips for taking your internal events virtual. Just a little bit more about me. I'm going to update what Tyler just said because I'm not traveling the world globally to speak on event technology right now, sadly. But the good news, technology is so robust, we can do these types of things remotely and from the comforts of for me, my basement, for many of you, your front porch, your living room, your office, you name it. So happy to have everyone for this topic, because I'm pretty passionate about this topic. We all think about taking our customer facing, our prospect facing events virtual, but what about those internal events that are critical and important for building employee engagement, retention, and many long-term advantages to fostering that type of collaboration and impact for your virtual events as well. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. One quick reminder, we will be sending out a $5 free coffee voucher for Starbucks, Dunkin' Donuts, and many other places that you can use if you're kind enough to take this quick survey at the end of this session today. So why do organizations plan internal events at all? I'm going to start from the bottom up. Clearly, as organizations are growing and trying to capture market share or constituents, whatever their goal is as an organization, developing skills of the employee base is super critical. And what better way to do that than in live events, whether they're virtual or in person. Setting goals for the year. We at Cvent do a global town hall meeting, and it's critical to get alignment across all staff on what the goals are and what the strategy is going to be for the upcoming year or quarter. Some organizations do quarterly town halls. We do that as well. Training and development. So to help folks further in their career and climb that ladder and think about skills that they need to reach that next rung, you might want to do formal training and development. And that's best accomplished in a group setting, in an event. Recognition and celebration, huge part of why you want to do internal events. Human beings are driven by recognition. It's clear. It's been proven time and time again. And as a sales leader, I know firsthand. We do a sales kickoff at the beginning of the year, and recognizing those quota crushers and people that did great work in the previous year, it is absolutely paramount to inspiring them to do great things. And then, of course, we even then have an incentive retreat for those top performers, which of course is another form of an internal event, which serves as both celebration and recognition. And we're debating right now what our strategy is for that event in 2021. And I gather many of you are in the exact same boat. And last but not least, employee engagement, motivation, and loyalty in general. Having internal meetings that go through strategy and development and recognition, all the things that we talked about before. At the end of the day, that's going to help motivate a team. That's going to help bring loyalty. It's very expensive to replace fully ramped members of the team. And you want that longevity, and events is often cited as one of the most important aspects of an employee's well-being. And they feel more connected to the company and to each other in those live events. So yes, maybe we're not doing as many in person right now, but how do we get the most bang for the buck in terms of events, internal events that is, even in the world that we're living in today? So let's take a look at some of the numbers. 90% of meeting and event professionals plan internal and external events. So most are doing a mixture. 64% of respondents in a survey from last year said that internal events are vital for employee retention. And 55% of planners say that managing internal events is more difficult than managing external events, which is shocking to me, because you would think at a high level, hey, an event that's for our customers or prospects, which has such an impact on, perhaps revenue and top line dollars, the stakes you'd think are higher. But I'll tell you, when you're doing an internal meeting, and it's about the message that's being conveyed to the troops globally, the C-level team within your company is going to be perhaps even more invested and more in the weeds on that event, therefore making it more difficult for an organizer or HR or a planner to pull it off, because there's more cooks in the kitchen and more people that want to help control the narrative and the process and how everything's going to flow. Here's a more recent study from literally last month. 78% of event planners are going virtual. 78%. So if you're sitting back thinking, I might not, know that over 3/4 of your peers are taking their events virtual. And they will all admit doing an event virtually is not, I repeat, is not as good as doing it in person. We all get that. I mean, we're all in the events industry. We believe in the power of live, the power of human connection. There's no replacement for it. But what is the best that we can do in the current environment? And then, of course, when live or in-person does come back, how do we marry a virtual experience with an in-person experience and execute on a hybrid strategy, which I'm sure many of you are now thinking about. So with that, let me get to some of the tips that we promised for today. 5 tips to take your internal events virtual. And the first tip is to make your event registration process seamless. And that seems kind of obvious, but I'll tell you what we're seeing today from many folks is registration experience for an internal event. It might be Outlook, like literally just accepting a meeting request, or it may be a registration tool or system or marketing automation form sitting over here. And then there's the virtual event. And the virtual event maybe is happening in Zoom, maybe it's happening in a more robust virtual event platform, but the two are not connected. So registration is happening over here, and then links and the connection to the day of tech that's being used to produce and deliver the event is sitting, separately in a silo. So you want a registration experience that looks on brand. So this is Blue Corp's sales kickoff, and it's got their styling and their color scheme, and not only on a desktop environment, but especially with people, with crazy schedules right now, 55, 60% of emails are read on mobile devices versus desktop. So you want to make it super easy from a mobile device to scan the details of the event and then walk through and register. And not just say that I'm coming. For many events that are more elaborate, like a sales kickoff, you might want details around what do I care about? Like what do I think are key things for us to accomplish next year in 2021? Which of the following 5 topics keep me up at night? How do I think I performed against my sales goals last year? What am I going to do differently next year? This is key stuff to harness so that the speakers or the CEO or the CRO can give a speech that's in line with what is being heard in the field. So right at the time of registration, it shouldn't just be about, are you coming or not coming? It's what kind of stuff matters to you? What are you thinking about in terms of your sales game? And you know what? We have 6 sessions on Tuesday morning, and then we have 3 sessions on Wednesday afternoon. And some stuff is general session, if you will, and some stuff is elected sessions. So we need your choices around what you're going to go to. So we can, feed you the right sessions later virtually. So you need a robust registration experience that looks the part. A sales kickoff is a high-profile event. A global town hall is a high-profile event. There's no reason that the same level of detail and care shouldn't be put towards your employees as it's being put towards customers and prospects as it relates to external events. Not only do you want to collect their choices in that regard, you want to collect post-event surveys. So during the registration experience, what do you care about? After the event, how do you think it went? How can we make our events better? For folks that are doing internal events, I'm sure you're not doing just one. Capturing that feedback in a branded, clean experience where that data is tabulated automatically can help you make very quick pivots in the way you're delivering content in your event program. One cool part is that you can give credits upon survey completion, which is a cool concept externally, but also works for many organizations internally. So if folks need to go to a certain number of events or sessions, and then it gets them 20 points, 50 points, 100 points, it's not just about attending the event. It's about attending the event and taking a survey. And imminently, our survey tool already has this. It has, as an example, Cvent can do this, but I think there's other tools as well. So this isn't really about Cvent, but there are tools that enable you to give almost a test, and then they can get credit upon attending, taking the survey or test, but also scoring above X number or Y number. We're about to release that imminently on our side. We already have scoring, but we can't have credits impacted based on the score. But we will soon, because that's something the marketing's clamoring for both external and internal events. Tip 2, and this is a really interesting concept. You need to view your technology for your virtual event as your venue. Your technology is replacing the hotel lobby and breakout rooms. It's replacing the convention center. It's replacing the restaurant. It's replacing a training room at your office. The technology is the venue, and most organizers spend on the venue. You need to be strategic and think about what is an appropriate level of spend as it relates to technology to pull off a virtual event. What you need to deliver is one place, one area for folks to connect to all of the content for your event. What many people do, like I said before, is you send an email, then great, I've registered, and they get a link to a Zoom. But what if there's a second session? Well, now I have a second Zoom link in a separate meeting request. And then there's something later that evening. Oh, there's a third Zoom link. There needs to be a master schedule where from that master schedule, the attendees can bop around to whatever makes sense for them. Again, there might be some general keynotes that everyone goes to, but there could also be breakout sessions that have been chosen in the registration experience. Those would then be available in a personal agenda for someone. Someone can manipulate their registration. They could share feedback. They could meet with partners. Maybe a sales organization wants to put in partners and vendors that you work with, maybe put them in an exhibitor area. And then there could be booths where the sales team, as an example, could meet up with those partners. Or maybe you want to allow for appointment setting. So during a global town hall or SKO or some sort of other internal meeting, allow people to schedule meetings with each other in advance or during. So maybe salespeople want to meet with product experts. Maybe client services folks want to meet with the product experts. Maybe the marketing team wants to collaborate with the sales team, and allow for all of these set times, maybe 2 hours here, an hour there. We are doing a virtual in-week at Cvent right now. We're using this sort of technology. We had a 1 hour mandatory session yesterday where people had to set a meeting with 4 people, 15 minutes. It was all pre-scheduled, all pre-configured, 15 minutes times 4, over an hour. And I had conversations with 4 people that I don't know that well, so that we can network and still get to know each other and still build the culture, even though we're not physically in person. And then we're doing another hour of the same on Thursday across our virtual in-week for the sales team. There's examples of how you can still leverage technology to foster that kind of connection across teams. An in-person event, traditionally, when held at a hotel, you're going to probably spend about 75% on non-tech, 25% on tech. So non-tech would be everything, right? Travel, food, production, hotel rooms, you name it. For a virtual event, that circle is going to be smaller. Your spend will likely be less for a virtual event than an in-person event, but you need to flip the ratios. 25% is maybe on the non-tech expenses, speakers, meetings, strategy to get the event together, maybe some production costs, but they'll be light in comparison. And then 75% on technology. Because again, the technology is serving as the venue. It has to work. It has to work reliably. It is not something that you ought to skimp on when the event is a marquee internal event that is important for building the stage and building the environment for the entire company for the year to come. Tip number 3, you want the sessions to be interactive. So there is such a thing as Zoom fatigue. And I know we're using Zoom right now, and I sit on Zoom all day, every day. But for a marquee internal event, what if you could have something a bit more robust, where the interactive session is housed inside of that broader environment and hub where everything else they need with respect to that event is there? So as an example, this could be a live session in the middle of that sales kickoff week. It's 3 folks collaborating. They're sharing a PowerPoint. The views are changing as they go. There's a live Q&A area on the right. Questions can be upvoted. There could be chat. There could be polling. There could be all sorts of cool interactive stuff built in to a slicker than Zoom sort of interface. If we were to scroll down on this page, I didn't set it up that way, but you could see details on the speaker and their profile. You could see more details on the session. So it becomes a much more robust environment for absorbing content. Is it worth it to go to the trouble of building this kind of environment for a 20-person internal meeting? No, I wouldn't think that it is. But there's probably a handful of key internal events that warrant this level of strategic thinking and investment. Tip number 4 is to invest in advanced production. That view that I just showed you a second ago, there's lots of different things that you can do. So you could use a production company, you can use some technology vendors. The point of the story is, don't make it just another Zoom. There's a way to have a live feed that is changing. moving the PowerPoint to one side and the people to another. And then, I'm going to bring in a second, a third person, or I want to have a big screen of the main speaker and the other two stay on. You need to think about your virtual events like a broadcast. It's like you're producing a live television program on the fly. But here's the rub. No one that does events as a living is a television producer. So you can either A, leverage experts to help you, or B, invest in some tools that make it easy for you to create something that looks like this, so that it is not just another Zoom or Google Meet or Teams or things along those lines. Simultaneously, for this may be only a fit for more external facing events, but there's a way with tools to simulcast something that's in a virtual environment also to social media networks, which is pretty slick idea if you want to get the word out around something you're announcing or doing as an organization. Tip 5, you want to measure engagement. So what if there was a way to get an engagement score as a measure of employee satisfaction from a virtual technology tool? Why do you want to do that? Because there are so many touch points. When an employee registers and maybe accepts an appointment, perhaps their score gets up to, say, a 30, and they're still kind of fuzzy. We don't know how engaged they're going to be, but they're starting to show signs of engagement because they did register and they did accept an appointment. But then that same person logs into the virtual event and attends the keynote, maybe even tweets about it. Okay, we're up to a 70 and a little less fuzzy. Now that same person submits a question, attends a session, gives session feedback, and then goes to the speakers list. Maybe see what else is happening the rest of the day. Okay, a bit of a clearer picture. And now we're up to 150 in terms of score. And then she continues along. She goes to a partner's booth. She goes to another one-on-one. She attends a training. She fills out the post-event survey. And then she watches an on-demand session afterwards. Well, now I've got a super clear picture, and she's up to 360. So there are so many touch points along the way. This is just a smattering of them, but there are more. I mean, there's hundreds of ways that they can interact with you in a virtual event environment. Why not measure all of that? And then stack rank everyone. Stack rank, we see that Ted Danson got a 380 and Christian here at the bottom is down to 260, and it would keep going. And we could see where they are relative to their peers. If it was a sales group, might it be interesting to look at that engagement level and see how that correlates or does not correlate to quota attainment? You could get ahead of the curve and think about, wow, I'm seeing less engaged folks at my SKO. Are they A, a flight risk? B, maybe not a flight risk, but not engaged? How has their performance looked over the last 2 to 3 quarters? And does that jive with what we saw in terms of engagement at the all-important SKO? You know, in times of uncertainty, we need to control what we can control, right? A sales team, as an example, is going to be, you know, dealing with externalities. They're going to be dealing with forces that impact the buying cycle and how they can connect with the marketplace and their buyers. So motivating your people and delivering your message becomes super important, more important now in this environment than it ever was before. So all the more reason one should not skimp on motivation of employees via events, especially on something like a sales kickoff that sets the tone for the entire year to come. And many people are obviously planning for that now because that event is generally in Jan or Feb. It's the event, you know, we do it in Feb as an example. Here's a bonus tip. We should start thinking about hybrid events now because it's going to come and you want to be ready and able to take off with hybrid events. And that will raise your cost model because you'll be paying for space, perhaps some production there so that it can be broadcast in a virtual environment. And then of course you'll have virtual event technology costs. And together, it may cost more, but it's going to be well worth it because you want to be sensitive to your audience and not everyone's going to attend in person. Not everyone will want to, continue to attend virtually forever. So you're going to have a model that makes sense for you. I think I'm talking to some people that think, you know what, when I go in person, it's just going to be 5-10% of people will watch some of it virtually. And then others are saying, you know what, we're going to walk and then run, crawl, walk, run kind of model. And we expect we're only going to bring 100 people in person and everyone else is going to be remote. 800 people will be remote. And then we'll kind of move those dials over time. From that a different survey from North Star Meetings, they had a survey done, and this I thought was a really compelling stat. 76% of planners said they are anticipating the need to provide a virtual alternative concurrently with a physical event in the future. So 76% of people agree that even when they go back to in-person, there is likely going to be a need to provide virtual at the same time. And that could look something like this, where here's a great speaker on stage for the Blue Corp sales kickoff. People are in the room at tables. Perhaps they'd be spaced a little more judiciously than this pick, but others are sitting at their dining room table, taking a survey from the mobile app, watching, putting in Q&A, and interacting with that virtual experience just the same. On that note about spacing, that becomes all the more important. So as you move to hybrid or fully in person, you need to think through spacing of those tables and design it in a way that is safe and proper. And there are tools that allow you to do a diagram check and will highlight in red tables that are not laid out properly. So you could kind of put some settings in, hey, I want them to be 6 feet apart, and then you can manipulate diagrams, but you need to know, are you falling out of compliance? Let's say I set this room to allow for 80 people, but it's an event with 300 people. Well, what happens all the time at events is person 81, 82, 83 come, and sometimes we might not care, and you put some perimeter chairs around the tables on the outside for overflow seating. But in the new normal, you're going to want to make sure that you're locking down attendance. So, session access control and scanning people in as they come into a room so that to cut it off at 80, because you set the room safely at 80. 85, 90, 100 makes it unsafe. So you don't allow for it. So having tools that allow you to lay out the space properly, but control who goes into that space becomes super critical. Designing the space and then even taking a look at it remotely can save you from needing to perform a site visit, but it allows you to walk around your space and see exactly what you've designed and how it will feel from an attendee's perspective. So tools like this exist, making it very easy for you to think through things and even lay out video screens and AV folks and camera placement, et cetera, so that you can think through how are you going to capture this content to share it virtually at the same time. So we've covered quite a bit in a half an hour here. I want to discuss some free resources that are going to be available to you. After this, we have training and certification at this event where we have courses specifically about virtual and hybrid hybrid events. We offer an ebook on setting up and executing your virtual event strategy. We specifically have another webinar coming up that's similar to this one, but it's going to talk a little deeper about setting up virtual sales kickoff. So not about internal events in general, but more so on the kickoff side. And then a webinar that goes a little deeper into the capabilities of our virtual solution, which again, we call the Virtual Attendee Hub. As it relates to hybrid, we actually did a session recently that focused on hybrid. That is available right now on demand on Meetings Today website. There's a webinar club section that some of you may be familiar with. So if you want more details right now on executing hybrid events, you can go to Meetings Today website and look for the webinar club section. So with that, I wanted to leave some time for questions. So I'll kick it back to you, Tyler, to sort of peruse the questions that have come in, and I'm happy to take them as they come.
Great. Thank you, Brian. A great presentation as always, very informative, and we all appreciate it. Had a number of questions come in. Feel free to send more in. We'll field them as they come in. But let's jump on right now. Planner says we usually bring in outside speakers for our larger team events. Do you recommend we keep that approach for virtual events? Have you done that, and was it successful or not?
I think it's a good idea. You can draw people that you might have not been able to before. Like as an example, at Cvent Connect, which is our, we got about 40,000 registrants to an event we just did a couple months back. We used to do it in Vegas. This year we did it online. And we had Arnie Sorensen, the CEO of Marriott, spoke. We've tried to get Arnie to speak before. He hasn't. But this time, if you just needed a ring light and a computer from his house, he was happy to join. So we had a great session with Arnie. It was one of the highest ranked sessions that, I don't know, 10, 15,000 people joined. And, you know, we probably wouldn't have been able to pull that off. So I think it actually even perhaps opens up your options for speakers that are not necessarily going to be in person. So I would definitely consider it. Today, as an example, I'm talking about the virtual in-week that I'm doing for my sales team. I had a CRO from another tech company that we've all known and respected. I got him to join and do a half an hour session for my sales team, which was great. So I do think spicing it up with outside speakers still makes a lot of sense virtually.
Yeah, and I know that we've done virtual events too, and we like to break them up with like a little entertainment section. We even had Wolfgang Puck, some of his people do a cooking demonstration. People love that. I mean, kitchen hacks, you know, something to break it up and give them a little something, because everyone's been sitting in front of computer screens for almost all year now. So got to spice it up a bit. Here's one, yes, it's kind of basic. Is there any key questions someone should ask a virtual event platform company?
I would drill into the services piece. A lot of the technologies look similar, but everyone is learning very, very quickly that, you know, due to the importance of the live stream working flawlessly when it's go time, you need to have a team in place that knows what they're doing and can triage any issues that might come up. I mean, I've heard in just a short amount of time, way too many heartbreaking stories of a virtual event gone bad. So I would look at functional needs for sure. You might have a checklist of things that you'd like, but I would spend as much time looking through the support infrastructure. What's the team that's going to be working with you? What is their experience? How many events have been done? And all those sorts of things that you have. You know, if you were missing one feature, that might be a small price to pay to make sure you've got a partner that's got, you know, a robust service team.
And this is a really interesting one. And it's something we learned when we did a virtual event, and we didn't plan for it. But is it better to pre-record speaker presentations? And I know that when we did our first virtual event, one of the speakers had a issue with bandwidth, and it just wasn't working to do it live. So we sort of thought we were lessening the quality by pre-recording it, but it ended up working better, and it was much more manageable. It all came in on time. And now that's kind of what we do. And I was just wondering what you thought about that, Brian.
I think it depends on the event. And I think a lot of folks do a mixed bag. So I think people come in with an intention of like, oh, we're going to do everything live. But listen, if you have 7 concurrent sessions and you want to have people in the green rooms working with the speakers for each session, they're all going to start at 1:30 to 2. You need people in each of those green rooms doing mic checks and light checks and internet speed checks and all that kind of stuff. So what a lot of people realize is, you know what, much of this we're going to pre-record and we're going to load it up, and it's going to be simulive. So even though it's pre-recorded, it will start at 2 on the nose. And if someone joins at 2:07, they're not joining from the beginning. They're joining at 2:07, 7 minutes in. Afterwards, they could start and stop it. But during, they're kind of watching a live broadcast. Like TV, I'm watching it live, but then, you know, later I can sort of watch it on my DVR. So we think that's a really smart strategy. There's some downsides. I mean, the good news is, you know, it's going to work. and it takes less staff to pull off concurrent sessions. The downside is the Q&A. So if you want the speaker to react to questions that are coming in live, you could leave a Q&A section next to a Simu Live session, but it's not like the speaker is going to be able to, in the middle of the speech or even at the end, easily sort of tackle those things. So there's a give and take, but if there's chat and polling and other tools to collaborate with people, you could still be in a good spot, even though the Q&A is rendered a little less useful in a pre-record.
And I know what we did is we had the speaker, and we told everyone it's, we taped it, and then they sat in on the chat, and then they fielded questions as they came in.
Yeah.
That was kind of cool.
That's a great approach. Good point.
Okay, here's another one. If we move toward doing hybrid events in the future, how do we determine who to allow to attend in person versus who attends virtually? Do we need to implement some sort of new safety protocol?
That's a really good question. I think a tough one, because it comes down to, I'm not sure that everyone thought, hey, the pandemic's going to enable us to save some money. But now that organizers are figuring out that, hey, I can still have a productive event virtually, the CFO and others that are looking at the dollars may turn to say, you know what, maybe it's not appropriate to have the majority in person. Maybe it is a segment, like we're thinking about it for our upcoming events in Jan and Feb, to say, hey, maybe it's the local people, because then it would only be a portion of our staff, the people that are in Washington, D.C. area. Maybe they get to go in person, and others are not going to fly in because of health concerns, and instead they join remotely. So sometimes it could just be as simple as who's sort of physically in the location where the speakers are. Other times it might be a decision driven by cost. Other times it might be based on, seniority and levels. So obviously maybe if it's a senior level meeting, you'll bring everyone in, but other people that have something to say during that meeting can pipe in remotely, and it's being broadcast live for the 27 people that are in a boardroom at a hotel. So I think there's going to be a lot of different models, and I don't think there's a one size fits all at all. So we'll see. But I think thinking about that now and getting ahead of it and contemplating what you think that split should be and having internal discussions around that and what that means from a cost impact, those are the sorts of things that I would do right now for events in late Q1 and Q2, and for sure for Q3, where we all feel strongly that we're going to be back to doing some element of the event in person.
Right. And then here's one, and I'm not sure if you have the answer on this, but it's an interesting question. What's a good question, or how do you phrase a question about an attendee's comfort level to return to in-person events for future planning purposes? And I'm guessing this is something that they would ask during the virtual meeting.
Around what should the organizer take a position on them being comfortable to return in person? Yeah,
I mean, they're how should they phrase that? And yeah, I don't know if there's any example out there, but I guess they're sort of trying to test the waters to see when attendees will be comfortable to come back. So if they want to plan something in Q2 or Q3.
I think what needs to be done is just sort of respect everyone and having a different view. And that's the cold hard reality. I mean, look at the world right now and look at how divided we are in terms of politics and leader and masks or no masks, and in person or not in person, and social distance, and what should we do and not do. You're going to have people on both ends of the spectrum, and you don't want to alienate either, which is why we know hybrid's going to be the model for a little bit.
Yeah.
I think what you want to do is make it very clear all the safety measures that are being put in place for the people that do elect to come in person. So the mindset should be, look, we're Switzerland. However you want to interact with the event, go for it. But for those that are comfortable traveling or taking a ride and being in person at this venue, these are the 17, and I really mean the list should be like 17. These are the 17 things that we're doing. Around, we're gonna have a coffee bar, but it's manned by a barista and no one's touching any of the stuff at all. And the seats are gonna be this far apart. And There's going to be a lunch, but it's all, preset, and your forks and knives are wrapped and in plastic. Really set them at ease at all of the measures that are being taken. And I think they might get a 5, 10, 15% increase, but it shouldn't be pushy. It should say, we don't care what you do. Just know that if you do come in person, every possible measure has been taken.
Yeah, and we've had personal experience with that because we are returning to our first in-person event in Orlando in November, and that was the question we had internally. I mean, how do we need to communicate to the attendees to let them know so they can make a decision for themselves whether they want to attend? And that really sparked us to write a story about that whole process, because I think that's where one of the places we're at in this whole thing is really communicating to attendees and getting them prepared for perhaps the return to in-person events. Here's another one. For advanced production, do you recommend we hire someone on our team to do that or outsource it to a third party?
It depends how many events you're going to do. If you're going to do a lot and production of high quality video, whether it's pre-recorded or sort of done on the fly, I might advocate for hiring someone. If you have an existing partnership with a production company or an AV company, I would stick with them as well. And the cool part is they can all produce an RTMP feed, which
what is that?
It's the output that they can provide that can be fed directly into most of the virtual event solutions. So let someone produce it, edit, do some of the things that you've entrusted them to do in the past, and then it's being broadcast through other technology that you've purchased that's taking that live feed as it's being produced. So it's a very simple, most tools that they're going to be using for editing and live production do allow for that RTMP output.
And here's an interesting one, and I brought up our example earlier. Is there a minimum bandwidth you recommend a presenter to have on their end? And I know when we did ours, everything just seemed, we had no worries about the speaker that, they eventually couldn't do it live because they're in a big office. But I mean, I think there's like things in the back end you don't even know about, security measures. And, is there a minimum bandwidth? And one thing I got to say is do a run through and test it out before.
It's different based on what you're doing. I mean, my gut feel says 20 Mbps as a minimum, but I've seen people do it at 10 or 15. Here's the thing. If you're just doing it through Zoom, like say you're just recording content through Zoom, and by the way, that can still go into a virtual event platform, right? So Zoom allows for an RTMP feed where it points out so that it goes into another tool so that there's all those other elements of the full schedule and all the networking and all the other things that Zoom can't do. So now use something that a speaker's comfortable with, everyone's comfortable with this, but have it displayed in that broader attendee hub. If someone's recording via Zoom, I think the bandwidth needs are lower. Maybe you can get by with 10 or 15. However, if you're using some of the more robust production tools, they require greater bandwidth, but then they also require the computers to have certain levels of RAM. So it's not just about internet speed, it's about the hardware itself. So what we're doing to combat this, we're partnering with an organization that's going to build speaker kits for us. And the speaker kit will have, like a ring light and maybe an external microphone, but we're going to put a nice iPhone in the box. Here's the irony. The camera and the ability for them to run the software that's needed for the production on the iPhone is oftentimes more robust than what people have in the way of their laptop.
Yeah.
So the phone can serve as the recording device, and then they have their full desktop set up, but then they put the phone on a little stand that we give them with the ring light, and they're off to the races. So it's not just about bandwidth, it's about the equipment itself.
Excellent. Here's an interesting one. What is your recommendation on alcohol-related events, such as a beer or wine festival? I know I've seen people do wine tasting. We can only have about 25% of attendees in person, but we want to get beer and alcohol to those watching live as well. and it can be difficult to do in the mail. And I would say, if you're going to do something like that, maybe don't schedule it for 9 in the morning. That might send a bad message. But I'm guessing there's a patchwork quilt of mailing wine or beer or alcohol, and you really got to check that out if you're going to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I love the idea. I've seen fully virtual events that involve alcohol, like margarita making sessions and other fun ways and wine tastings and whatnot. But if you're going to have part of the crew in person and part remote, I do think it would be cool to give them the opportunity to partake in some of the same things. I think the better way is to give them a code, right, or a coupon that they then use so that the winery or the beer distributor or wherever you're pointing them to get what they should get for the event, that the shipping and the ordering process is all done through those guys who already have a methodology to ship wine and booze, and you don't as an organizer, and you don't want to send that out to 200 people, but they do it as a business. So rely on the infrastructure that already exists to distribute booze or wine to an audience that's remote.
And I would say too, think about your attendees. There may be some people that don't drink alcohol for whatever reason. So my gut feeling would be it'd be fun to offer something like that, and maybe as a sort of a ancillary fun program. But I don't know if you want to have people feel left out in a big main program.
You'd have to give options so everyone can feel included for sure.
Here's one too, and I've seen a lot of our readers interested in this. Do you know if there's a course available to become certified in providing virtual events? It's quite costly. So my question is, how important is it for meeting planners to become certified? Do you think they need to take that step?
I think it's helpful. I mean, it's new for everyone. We offer a certification course at Cvent. So certainly that's going to be available. That will be one of the links that's available inside of that webinar club that we referenced earlier. And I think that's been shared in the chat now. I think it makes you marketable for sure. Most organizers, again, don't have the technical background to pull off virtual events. And look, your job is becoming harder. You have to manage all the same things that you've been managing. When we go back to hybrid, you're going to still care about F&B and speakers and decks and location and room rates and all that stuff. But now you also have to be thinking through the technology and the infrastructure and how that can be broadcast and into what technology tools and what are the best, most optimized configurations and setups. It's your job. And some organizations have event technologists. We saw that starting pre-pandemic. I think the need for that is just gone like that post-pandemic because it becomes a more technical job. So every opportunity you can take to dig in and learn and be certified, that's great for you in the role that you're in. But I also think it makes you highly marketable if you were to look for other opportunities. Flashing that certification makes you very valuable.
Yeah, and like you said, everything I'm hearing is hybrid is something that's here to stay. All the planners, and 80-90% of the planners I talk to recognize that. And so, it may be worth the investment, whatever that investment is, to get certified, because that's a skill set I think meeting and event planners are going to need moving forward. And, I have one great friend who's a live events person and did huge festivals. And, she now is transitioning, at least for the moment, and got certified in COVID-19 mitigation or, checking that out for live events. So, I guess broadening your skill set in a time like this is just good career advice in general. And
you may have extra time, frankly, because
now's the time
to less events.
Now's the time to focus on those. And then here's one. It's about like time zones. And I know, there's more people on the East Coast. So I know we always sort of defer to the Eastern time zone. How do you deal with those? This person, they're doing events across North America. So thinking of only doing 1 to 5 Eastern, but that shortens the window of time for sessions. And then maybe an ancillary question, and this is one of the magic sort of golden questions, is how long should these programs be? You don't want to tie everyone up
Yeah.
all day, most likely, right?
Yeah, you can't get their attention for that long. There's too many competing priorities, especially when they're sitting in a home office. So for starters, I agree. Events should not start at 8. I think 11:30 at the earliest, right? Because then that's 8:30 Pacific. We, as an example, we did our Cvent Connect for North America, but we're doing a separate Cvent Connect for Europe. Now, having said that, 3,000 of the 40,000 registrants were from Europe. So we marketed it, and many of them still responded, and they joined, and maybe it was pretty late for them, but they went to 9 or 10 o'clock at night. But I think you want to be sensitive to that and think about what you need to do. And it might be a mixture of multiple events. And for sure in North America, start the event later, and you got to end it at a reasonable time as well for the East Coast. So you do shorten the window, which leads to the second part of your question, which is the event can't be as long. Sessions for sure should be 30 minutes, 45 max, but most people are doing 30-minute sessions, especially if there's back-to-back-to-back sessions.
Yeah.
You need to give a little bit of time between the sessions. You need to make the sessions compelling. It comes back to the advanced production. If it's just the same one speaker for 45 minutes in the same view the entire time, that's boring. Think about the news. Like, they don't stay on one person, one screen for longer than like a minute or two. So you have to keep changing the dynamic and changing the layout and change how many people are there and change what's on the screen and keep it dynamic. And then you can hold attention maybe for 30 minutes, 45 max. And if it needs to spread out over a few days, like if I could have done an event that was a full day, 8.5 hours, but now I have to compress it due to the time zones, and now I only have 4 hours of content. Okay, make it 2 days from 1 to 5. Nothing wrong with that.
We learn that fast, because typically when we do a webinar, like today it's an hour long, we immediately cut it down to a half an hour. And then the one thing we learned on the first one we did is, it's nice to give them like a 15-minute break too in there, so because, people want to go, do what they need to do and kind of recharge maybe for 15 minutes. Well, we're getting near the end of the program today, and maybe I'll just throw it out to Brian for any closing thoughts. And then also we've got a number of questions that are very interested in the speaker kits. So maybe explain a little more about that. The ring light, do you let the people, do you reckon, I mean, I guess it depends on your budget, but you can let the people keep the iPhones or iPads if you want. So maybe tell us more about the speaker kits, and then close it out with any final thoughts.
We're starting with a rental model versus a purchase. That's what we're hearing more about. I guess if there's demand for it, we could sell it. I mean, we kind of did something similar already for On Arrival, which is our check-in app. Like, we have this event in a box, we call it, and it comes with a printer and 2 iPads, or 2 printers and 4 iPads, and all of the stuff, and a nice padding. And we originally were going to do that as rental, but then a lot of people said, I want to buy them. I want to keep it. I'll ship it around. I don't mind. I'll ship it wherever I need to ship it. So then we came up with a purchase option as well. So maybe we'll follow the similar path, but for now we're starting with 2 different boxes for rental. The prices will be between like $100 to $150, and the $150 will include an iPhone. The $100 won't, and instead will include an external camera that can be hooked up to the desktop environment, which you don't need if you're using the iPhone, because the iPhone serves as the camera. So a little more expensive to get the iPhone one, less expensive to do the other, but there will be those choices. And then, that would include, those costs include the shipping to and the shipping return. All in round trip, it'll be 100, 105 for the simpler box, and the one with the iPhone will probably be like 145 to 150. But don't quote me on that. We literally just had the meeting yesterday where we were deciding on that. So it's not 100% final. And then back to your point on closing thoughts, I think, look, we're in strange times. Those of us that embrace this time and get certified and think about how to be strategic and get ahead of hybrid and get educated on options and think through what's going to speak the most to their audience, both for internal and external, and really start thinking about your total event program, I think it sets you apart. And that was part of why we wanted to do a session today specifically on internal, because so often we talk to people about the external events, but internal is almost just as important. And you need to think about the total program, in-person, virtual, hybrid, events that you go to and events that you host, events that are for customers and prospects, events that are for inspiration of your own folks. And think about it that way. And then that'll help you make better decisions on technology partners and strategy overall.
Well, great. Thanks, Brian. I always love doing these sessions with you. You're a font of knowledge, so I appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
And thank you all for joining us. Following today's webinar, you will be redirected to a short survey submitted by CVent. And then upon completion of the survey, you'll be redirected to today's webinar club page, which Brian mentioned earlier. Each webinar has its own unique webinar club page where you can download today's presentation, view the webinar on demand, obtain today's CMP credit certificate, and much more. So Brian has provided some additional information on the topic, and that will also be on the webinar club page, as well as a great earlier session we did with Brian before that I really think you should check out. It's very informative. So thanks again to Brian and to all of you for joining us for this webinar. Have a great day, and we hope to see you again real soon.